Okay, students, Mr. Flanagan here. This will be the last learning unit that we will look at. And it will also prepare you for your last assessment for the year. Remember, you need to complete all this assessment to have a complete mark to get a pass of 50%. Now, this unit is about classroom management in the diverse South African economic classroom. Now, the key word here is management, classroom management. As a teacher, you must manage your class. Now, what does it mean? Perhaps we should look at what is the basic components of management. Management is about leading the learners. It's about control. It's about discipline, all those aspects. Now, if we don't have that, then our classrooms are normally in chaos. So it is important that you have an understanding of classroom management, because everything else falls flat if you do not manage your class well. Now, if we look at the slides, the first slide says maintaining order in a classroom is a basic task of teaching. Yes, there must be order. You cannot teach while learners are doing their own thing. They must listen to you, you must listen to them, and you must all work together. So that is important. It's a basic task of teaching, and sometimes the results of the schools are poor because there are no management. If you go visit a school and you walk around, you can get an idea of the type of school by seeing what is going on. If there are no learners on the corridors, you can hear the teachers and learners are busy. Then we regard that as a good school because we know that teaching is happening there. But when learners are walking around the corridors and the learners are making a noise in class, we can rightly assume that there is not much teaching going on there. So to maintain order in a classroom is a basic task of teaching. Then a narrow and autocratic, in other words, where the teacher rules the scepter, to classroom management is to focus on discipline and control only. Only. We shouldn't focus on that only, but it is part of that. That is according to Van Wyk in 2016. A narrow and autocratic approach is important, but we should also look at the personal teaching philosophy of the teacher. Now, the personal teaching philosophy of the teacher is what you feel inside yourself that you want to bring to the school, to the profession, and to the learner. Basic classroom management skills that aspiring teachers, that is you, that's going to teach one of these days, should possess includes planning. You need to plan for every day, of which your lesson planning is the most important component. Because when you plan your lesson, you are ready for whatever the day might bring. You are ready to transfer the content. You are ready to deal with the questions. You are ready for everything. Implementing is when you apply what you've planned during your lesson. In other words, it's what you present in class. And that is also very, very important. Teachers that do not teach, you can hear from their classes. The teacher would sit at his or her table. Learners would watch a video, if at all. And there is just generally chaos in class. And you get caught out, and students lose respect for you. So you need to be prepared by planning, then you must implement it. You must monitor how learners adhere to the classroom rules. If you have a rule that you can only go to the bathroom at the end of a period, or whatever rule you might have, you must follow up whether learners are adhering to that. Then, of course, there is classroom discipline. You cannot teach if there's no discipline in your class. In other words, the learners must give you space to teach. Their behavior must be as such. And also control. Right. Now, the last bullet is saying classroom management shifted from a military type organization Military type organization meant in the olden days the teacher was the poster of the class and the learners didn't have much to say. Of course, that has changed these days with democratic teaching that is happening in schools. So it says classroom management has shifted from a military type organization to developing self-discipline through character education by managing student behavior. In other words, student must, you don't have to tell them what they must do. They should actually self-discipline themselves. And that happens through character education. So the next slide looks at the components of basic classroom management. So what are the basic components of which classroom management consists? It consists of 5 big components, namely building a classroom culture, classroom management and rules, consequence management, classroom disruptions, and well-planned engaging lessons. Now we're going to look at each one of them shortly, but we will concentrate on the last 2 components. Now, building a classroom management is about the teacher's role. Remember, the teacher remains prime to the function of teaching. His role is very important because it contributes to the behavior of the student in the classroom. So the teacher's role is part of building a classroom culture. The teacher must be an authority when it comes to his subject because this helps them to gain respect and trust necessary to lead learners and to exude confidence. If you are not confident, learners will pick it up and they tend to lose trust in you. As a teacher, as an authority, you should not be afraid to challenge learners. Be direct and firm. Remember, you are still in control of the class. It is your class. Do not allow them to rattle you. And then, very importantly, what we have lost in the teaching arena is the dress. Dress as an authority figure. You cannot dress as a thug and go to a classroom. You must dress as a teacher. We must get back our professionalism as teachers, and part of that is dressing appropriately. And part of building a classroom culture also include that you must have vision and goals. We normally talk about the SMART principles. You must have specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals. And you market your goals by posting them on the walls. Teach learners when they enter the class, they must know that these are the vision and goals that applies in this classroom. Also make your classroom atmosphere real nice by having rituals and themes such as the birthday of your registered classes celebrated by singing for the learner in the morning or whose birthday it is. Also, there must be a proper environment. The classroom must be safe, clean, and aesthetic. And that is not just the responsibility of the janitors or the cleaners at the school. It is the responsibility of everybody. Don't let papers and stuff lie around on the floors in your classroom. Pick them up or ask the learners to pick them up. Make that one of your rules in the classroom that you are not going to start to teach unless your classroom is clean. I did practice teaching the other day at a school, and it was shocking to see what the the school grounds look like, and also inside the class. It was clear that the teachers didn't care about that, and it just creates a not so good atmosphere. Then secondly, a basic component of classroom management is classroom rules and regulations. Establish rules for learners so that they know what is expected of them. But very importantly, don't spell it out in the form of don'ts, but rather in the forms of do's. For example, arrive on time for your lesson. instead of do not arrive late for your lesson. Always portray positivity. And then you must enforce these rules at all times to all learners with no exceptions. These rules must be consistent and fair. Then consequence management, we hear a lot about this in South Africa currently. If people transgress, there should be consequences thereof. Whether it's being applied or not is an open question. But in your class, make sure that learners are being rewarded for behaving themselves, and those that transgress they must face the consequences. Then we have a component called classroom disruptions. And you can see there's an asterisk next to it because it's important. We will do it in a separate slide. And also, of course, well-planned engaging lessons is a serious and very important component of classroom management. There's no substitute for well-planned engaging lessons. When you are busy with your learners, they won't have time to do other things. Or it will lessen them to do other things. It will lessen the time they have to do other things. So it is a very important component. So then I look at the slide on basic classroom management, classroom disruptions. Now you get three types of disruptions: minor disruptions, chronic disruptions, and major disruptions. So you must be aware of it and you must respond accordingly. Now, what is minor? Minor is not a big disruption. It is just learners trying to frustrate you or trying to frustrate their classmates, such as pen tapping, whispering, giggling, etc. You don't have to make a big issue out of that. Otherwise, you're going to waste time. And it is not fair that through one learner's inappropriate behavior that the rest of the class must suffer in terms of minutes that has gone by. So for minors disruption, you as a teacher give them a quick look. You call out the student by name, etc. Sometimes you can just go stand next to the learner while you are teaching. A chronic disruption is a disruption that it's a negative behavior that continue even after being addressed by the teacher. You know, when somebody is chronically sick, like they have diabetes or they have hypertension, it must be treated all the time. Daily, they must take their medication. Now, you also get those type of disruptions. It continues even if you speak to the learner. It doesn't stop. So what do you do in such a case? You document the frequencies of the disruption in a journal. You must have a separate book for discipline or the disruption journal. And you gradually increase the degree of punishment. For example, a learner that keeps on disrupting the class. You first talk to the learner, then you ask the learner to remain behind during break, then you ask him to remain behind during after school because they don't like that. Or you take the matter up with the disciplinary committee at the school. So you gradually increase the degree of punishment. Eventually you call the parents, which they do not like. Right? So for this type of behavior, for chronic disruptions, you let the learners sign behavior contracts and you get the parents involved. The last type of disruption is what we call major disruption. This type of behavior endangers teachers and learners. Now, we know that these days what is in the news is the issue of bullying. Bullying would be regarded as a major disruption or a major form of negative behavior. And it should be addressed in a serious fashion because we know of learners that committed suicide because of that. So we need to know the school's policy on these transgressions, such as the destruction of school property, fighting in class and bringing weapons to school, bringing drugs to school and use it, bringing alcohol to school and use it. That would be sort of major disruptions. And how do we deal with those? We address them by being steady and firm. Do not shout or lose your temper. Address the learner directly and immediately. If the learner is venting, especially in the case of a fight, try to calm the learner down by acknowledging his or her feelings. If you are the victim of such disruption, do not respond with violence. Seek help if the learner has to be restrained. Involve the head of discipline. If the school isn't doing anything about negative behavior that affects you, you can call in your union. The next component, which is very important and that we address in a separate slide, because it's also important for your assessment, is well-planned lessons. A teacher that is busy, I can assure you, has got less problems than a teacher that is not busy. Now, what can we do? In this instance, well-planned, engaging lessons will decrease student behavior problems. And by that, I stand. Teachers that are busy have less problems than those that are not busy. Use variety in your teaching methods. Use variety in your teaching method. Do not use the same routine every day. All right. Today you start your lesson with a video. Tomorrow you start it with a placard or something else. But vary your lessons. Make use of humor. Don't always be serious. But the humor and the jokes that you use must be appropriate to the lesson. Have clear objectives to keep your student on task and working towards a goal. In your lesson plan, you normally have aims and objectives of the lesson. Write it down on the chalkboard or put it on a slide and show it on the overhead projector. That these are the objectives that we are trying to achieve today. And you mark them off as you go along. And you shouldn't have more than 4 or 5 objectives per lesson. And so that it will indicate the learners why they are there and that you are not just there for in J&J, but you are really there to work with them. When in these days, the days are over of where the teacher is teaching alone and the learners must just accept what they are being taught. That is the teacher-centered approach. We are past that. We must use learner-centered teaching methods so that the learners are involved. The learners are there to learn. Just as you are there to teach, you are not there to teach only. You are mostly there to facilitate because the learners must also form part of the lesson. That also causes management problems if the learners are sitting in a class and they are not contributing anything. For 40 minutes, they just sit there. They do nothing. That means there is no learning that is taking place. You might feel good about yourself because you think you've delivered a good lesson. But remember, it is important that the learners get involved in the lesson. So you must use inquiry-based activities to engage learners and foster problem-solving skills. How are you going to foster problem-solving skills? By learners debating, engaging with one another. You are the facilitator. In economics is so interesting. There's so many topics that you can let the learners engage each other on. But you must monitor the whole process. So well-planned lessons is another component of classroom methods. Now, where does classroom management comes from? It comes from learning theories. Now, I think in chapter 2, we've also dealt with learning theories, but that was in the context of how learners learn, right? Cognitive theories, such as behaviorism, such as constructivism, etc. Now, with regard to classroom management, there are about 13 theories in your learning unit that you need to engage with. But I've just listed the most important ones, and you will be assessed on this, like the behaviorist theory. The behaviorist theory that came about through the works of Skinner and Pavlov. Teachers uses rewards and punishment to achieve desired behaviors. Right? If you are a learner gets a good mark, for example, you reward them with something. And they would want the expectation of this theory is that the learners will then continue with that behavior because they enjoy being rewarded. Or punishment, if they do something wrong, you give them a punishment. And the idea of this theory is that they will refrain from doing what they are doing because they know they are going to get punished. Another theory which is important in the era that we find ourselves in is the democratic theory or the democratic classroom theory, where learners are given a voice and real influence on the rules of the classroom. If you involve learners in the making of the rules of the classroom, those rules that I said earlier that you can paste onto your classroom walls, they tend to agree or to adhere more to it because they have been part of its formation. Right, then there is a theory called the psychoanalytic theory that was developed by Rudolf Dreikurs. And with this theory, it is the result, misbehavior is the result of a child believing that they can break rules or achieve it to protect their status in a group. Because of peer pressure, some learners feel the need to prove themselves in a group, and they even challenge the teacher to prove that. So that is called the psychoanalytic theory. Then a very important theory, it's Ginot's theory. Now, this theory is saying that teachers make a big issue out of a disciplinary method to denigrate or to humiliate a learner. And teachers should refrain from doing that. And I've seen that a lot. But sometimes a learner transgresses. Maybe it's a minor transgression or maybe a chronic transgression. And then the teacher stops his class and he just concentrates and he tells the learner off. He in fact humiliate the learners because he wants to prove who is the boss of the class. And we should, as teachers, we should not involve ourselves in such behaviors. All right. Then other theories are the human choice theory approach. It is a theory that is focused on giving learners maximum choice in the classroom with the trust that they will make decisions that enhance their own well-being and well-being of others in the classroom. And also there is the token economy theory, the cognitive theory, etc. And you can go read on them.